We used to have a city attorney who wanted to be mayor. Now we have a mayor who wants to be city attorney.
Sharp words between San Diego's mayor and city attorney. I'm Dwayne Brown. We'll show you the testy exchange tonight on KPBS Evening Edition. Also tonight, a new twist in the controversy over an elementary school yoga class. A lawsuit's been filed.
Sequestration could mean a delay in the search for cures for cancer and other diseases. I'm Amita Sharma. We'll talk with San Diego scientists about what potential budget cuts mean for their life-saving projects. Also tonight, San Diego students are accused of threatening violence against classmates, and a teacher is charged with bringing a loaded gun to class. What's happening in San Diego schools? We'll talk with the district's police chief.
And planners in Carlsbad are facing a tough task tonight, balancing open space, new housing, and local history. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Hello, thanks for joining us. San Diego Mayor Bob Filner showed up unannounced at a news conference today and got into a heated debate with City Attorney Jan Goldsmith. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser is in the newsroom. She's been following this. Claire, what happened?
Well, it was supposed to be City Attorney Jan Goldsmith's press conference, but Mayor Filner slipped in midway and then took the podium. He said it was not Goldsmith's job to be talking to the press, and that if Goldsmith had a legal opinion, he should have shared it confidentially with the mayor.
He did not advise me. It would have been nice, Mr. Goldsmith, to have a memo. It would have been nice to have advice. I am your client. That's privileged communication. You not only have been unprofessional but unethical in this press conference.
Well, it sounds like the mayor is in a disagreement with the city attorney. When did this start?
Well, Filner is refusing to release money from a hotel room fee because he says that fee is illegal. Now he wants legal protection for the city if the issue goes to court, and a cut of the hotel fee for other city services. Goldsmith said the city already has legal protection and that taking a cut of the hotel fee for the city would be illegal because then that fee would become a tax.
Then it's no longer just benefiting you. That is a tax, and it is illegal to impose a tax without a vote of the people.
So what will happen if this fight continues?
Well, Goldsmith said he could not comment on whether Filner has to release the hotel money or what would happen if he didn't, because it's a legal matter. But he did leave us with this one last quip.
We used to have a city attorney who wanted to be mayor. Now we have a mayor who wants to be city attorney.
Oh yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on this one. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser. Some parents in Encinitas have filed a lawsuit to stop an elementary school yoga program. Ashtanga yoga is part of the district's PE curriculum. Some parents say it's religious. The lawsuit calls on the Encinitas Union School District to suspend the yoga program and replace it with traditional PE. For now, district officials say the program will continue. They say there's no religious element to it. Anthem Blue Cross is suspending a controversial policy for patients with HIV and AIDS. Recently, we told you how those patients would have had to get their medications by mail, but a consumer group sued, saying the policy broke the law by targeting people based on their health condition. So now Anthem is suspending its policy, and patients can keep going to their local pharmacies. San Diego's aging infrastructure has been causing a lot of headaches for commuters this week. A water main break in the East Village blocked traffic this morning. The pipe is more than 100 years old. Next week, the city's new infrastructure committee will look at how priorities are set for replacing old pipes. The Census Bureau says California's rate of home ownership is still sliding. It's now the second lowest in the nation, just above New York. About 54% of Californians owned their homes in the last quarter of 2012. Back in 2005, home ownership was just over 60%. California regulators are celebrating a preliminary ruling. It could put $1.5 billion back into consumers' pockets. The settlement is linked to profiteering during the state energy crisis in 2000. KPBS business and environment reporter Eric Anderson joins us from the News Center. Eric, what specifically is this settlement for?
Well, Dwayne, the $1.6 billion tentative judgment is the penalty that an administrative law judge says about 30 energy companies will have to pay. Energy traders working for Shell, the Bonneville Power Administration, and others were found guilty of manipulating the energy marketplace to drive up prices and their profits. Now, if you look back, California's at the time newly deregulated electricity market had a shortage of power, and energy traders gamed that market to drive up prices and drive California to buy expensive long-term power contracts. The California Public Utilities Commission's lawyers are calling this a victory for consumers.
Now, is this the first settlement?
Well, in fact, it's not. The state has already covered close to $3 billion and returned that to customers. And there are two other legal actions in the works that could result in settlements close to $1 billion each. But consumer advocates do point out that billions more are forever lost because some energy companies no longer exist. Enron went bankrupt before any money could be recovered.
So how much will California customers be getting back?
Well, if the settlement is approved, and that's still far from final, customers could see an energy credit of about $20 on their electricity bill. The $1.6 billion figure sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but it has to be split by more than 20 million electricity customers.
Yeah, do the math. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson. 9 days and counting until the sequester. San Diego's science research community is significantly beholden to federal grant money. Researchers could see a 9 or 10% cut if Congress doesn't avoid sequestration by March 1st. The Salk Institute in La Jolla is one of hundreds of researchers in San Diego facing possible cutbacks. It's been focusing on disease discovery and mentoring of future scientists, from genetic conditions to providing better understanding of brain disorders, aging, and cancer.
It's going to dramatically affect research in San Diego, which is rated among the very top research places for doing cancer research in the world. It will mean a loss of perhaps 4,500 jobs out of the 45,000 that are here. And most importantly, it's going to dramatically affect our ability to impact those people who are one word away from being a cancer patient.
The thought of funding being cut, especially for cancer research, is very scary. I think we need to do everything within our power to ensure that that does not happen.
Bianca Kennedy is undergoing breast cancer treatment for a second time. She held up a picture of a friend who recently died from cancer during childbirth. Kennedy has been working with Salk researchers as a patient advocate. She was invited to speak at a news conference today held by Congressman Scott Peters. Amita Sharma is in for Peggy Pico tonight with more on how federal spending cuts would affect San Diego's science community.
San Diego is considered a hub for cancer research, work that has helped drive the cancer rate down by 20% in the United States. But progress in finding cures for cancer and other diseases is at risk unless Congress can avert across-the-board federal cuts, known as sequestration, scheduled to take effect March 1st. Joining me are researcher Dr. Thomas Kipps of Moores Cancer Center at UC San Diego and Jimmy Jackson, Vice President of Biocom, a life sciences trade group. Dr. Kipps, what kind of research do you do, and how important is federal funding for that work?
Well, my work actually specializes in leukemia, and one type of leukemia, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, that is the most common adult leukemia in the United States. And the work that we're doing is to try and find ways of trying to treat patients that previously did not seem to have any treatment options available. The NIH has been critical for funding research that has given us new insights into what causes the disease, what causes its progression, and now we have developed new targets for therapy which are really now bearing fruit in the clinic. It's very gratifying to see patients that formerly would not have had very many options for treatment now receiving treatment that has made their lives much more livable, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to achieve a cure for this disease.
Jimmy, if sequestration happens, how will research by Dr. Kipps be affected and work done by other science labs in San Diego?
Well, if the NIH cuts happen, a lot of the research dollars will go away. I mean, there are estimates that the NIH will be reduced by about 5% in their total research budget, and it's hard to tell exactly who's going to get cut. But in San Diego, in the life sciences community in San Diego supports 42,000 jobs and a $12 billion direct economic impact. A lot of that is in the research and development and the research institute area. So that is going to be a tremendous impact, not just on the life sciences community, but on the whole regional economy in San Diego.
Dr. Kipps, what's the ultimate effect on the public and on current and future cancer patients?
Well, I think what the sequestration might provide for is an interruption on research that's ongoing. And it's not just a temporary stoppage of events, but there actually may be projects which are put on hold, which might take considerable time to revamp. What might be lost are opportunities over the short term, but as we were talking about earlier, the prospect that we might be influencing decisions of bright, young, talented researchers in the future who might make critical decisions about whether to pursue a career in biomedical research. I feel very privileged to be involved in biomedical research, but obviously our young scientists that are looking at whether this is a career that they can use to continue on, they may opt out, and so therefore we may be also sacrificing some of the next generation of scientists that might be very important for developing the cures of tomorrow.
Jimmy, how real do you see these cuts, and what are you doing, what is your group doing to lobby lawmakers to avert these cuts?
These cuts, or the threat of these cuts, is very, very real, and we have a representative in Washington who has been lobbying Congress about the importance, trying to educate them on what will happen with these cuts, and also trying to find champions who will help us minimize the impact if the sequestration cuts happen. There was a bill introduced last week by a representative from Washington State that would say that the NIH, because of the work they do is so important, would be exempted from the cuts for a 6-month period. So it's not a broad-based 10-year exemption, but it's just a temporary thing to make sure that some of the critical research that's happening in labs like Dr. Kipps and in our research institutes and in our clinics can go on uninterrupted.
Dr. Kipps, is there another source to replace federal funding? What about private funding?
Well, I think the American public has been very generous through philanthropy, and we do have very important organizations such as the American Cancer Society, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the Lymphoma Research Foundation. However, these are actually supplying just a small fraction of the amount of research dollars that are used in biomedical research. The NIH has really been the bulwark for research activities throughout the country. And I think a significant cutback there is going to affect dramatically the ability to conduct research in not only San Diego but also elsewhere.
And very quickly, how do you prepare for impending cuts?
Well, I'm optimistic. I'm very hopeful that our congressmen, senators, and even the administration will see that this is not something that can be sustained, that it might do damage not only for the short term, for the longer term. And I think saner heads will prevail. So I'm optimistic that there will be solutions found at the 11th hour. I'm hopeful that we don't have to engage in these cuts because I don't think we can even envisage what the ramifications are going to be.
Dr. Kipps, Jimmy Jackson, we have to close it there. Thank you for coming on the program
and speaking to us.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
And there will be more on the possible effects of sequestration tonight on the PBS NewsHour at 7 o'clock. BAE Systems is warning nearly 1,400 San Diego workers of possible layoffs because of another looming congressional deadline. Lawmakers have to pass a budget by March 27th to keep the government going. The Navy says it may cancel some repair work at BAE shipyards in San Diego and other locations. BAE says it doesn't expect immediate layoffs here, but it's making preparations. Two more San Diego Padres have been linked to a doping investigation by Major League Baseball. The league is looking into claims a Florida clinic supplied performance-enhancing drugs to players. Documents obtained by ESPN name shortstop Everett Cabrera and reliever Faustino de los Santos. Cabrera has met with Padres management, and they tell UT San Diego they're satisfied with what they heard. Another Padres player has already been suspended after testing positive for testosterone. Catcher Yasmani Grandal is also linked to the Florida clinic. He'll sit out the first 50 games of this season. Lance Armstrong talked with Oprah Winfrey last month about his use of performance-enhancing drugs, but he's not talking to the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. The agency wanted him to do a tell-all under oath if he wanted to reduce his lifetime ban from sports. Armstrong's attorney says he won't participate in a process designed to demonize selected individuals. Schools across the nation are searching for ways to spot troubled students before they act out violently. Amitha Sharma and her guests discuss who's keeping San Diego students safe.
Shocking headlines from San Diego County schools in recent weeks. In separate incidents, 2 middle school students were taken into custody for allegedly threatening violence, and a middle school teacher pleaded not guilty this week to a weapons charge after he allegedly carried a loaded gun and a knife to school for protection. Joining me to talk about school safety is San Diego Unified Police Chief Ruben Littlejohn and Trish Hatch, Director of the School of Counseling at San Diego State University. Chief Littlejohn, what's happening here? I know you can't talk about the specifics of these cases I just outlined, but how unusual is it for students to make threats involving weapons?
Well, the San Diego Unified School District Police Department is a fully sworn and accredited police department who investigates about 10 of these a year. They're not something that's brand new to us, but in this post-Newtown era, I think senses are heightened, and so we're waiting on bated breath, really, for the next incident of violence, and we're hoping it's not going to occur in our school district.
How adept is our campus police in spotting these threats?
They're very adept, and they work with school counselors and administrators on how we can address issues with kids who have a propensity for violence.
And Professor Hatch, what role do school counselors play in identifying students who have a propensity for committing violence?
And when there's a student on campus that teachers, parents, or others are concerned about, and the school counselor intervenes with that student, they'll provide one-on-one counseling. They may have them in a small group, and they'll work with the family and the teacher with that student. But there are times when the interventions that the counselors are providing just don't seem to be making a difference. And when we notice a student's behavior is outside of their normal developmental range, or they have a behavior that's just not in alignment with what's the situation at hand, then it's time for them to really seek an additional consultant to see what other types of things may be at play. So they may consult with the school psychologist, they may consult with the school social worker if they have one, maybe the school resource officer, depending on the type of behavior the student has. If it's just outside of a reasonable or appropriate reaction to a normal developmental situation, that's cause for alarm and a red flag, and for a counselor to say, we might need to take a look at what other things might be going on here.
Now, there have been cuts to school counselors.
Yes.
What effect is that going to have on school violence prevention?
It's a huge effect, because we can't do the prevention education for the students that the school counselors need. Unfortunately, they become, well, in some places, they're just putting out fires rather than really helping do the prevention services, to teach the students the knowledge, the attitudes, and the skills they need to get into the prevention piece of it first. You know, when counselors are in the classroom teaching curriculum, the students know who they are, and they create a relationship with the students. Then when there's a need for an intervention because a student might have multiple infractions of behavior and they want to help get them the skills they need, that student knows who the counselor is. But when the only time they see a counselor is when they actually end up having, a severe problem, and the counselor's not part of the whole school-wide system, well, then there isn't a way to prevent the concern. There also isn't a relationship with that student. We have 800 to 1 ratio of school counselors in the state, and there's just not enough time for counselors to do the work they need.
Chief Littlejohn, I want to talk to you about reports that have been published regarding San Diego Unified Police carrying AR-15 rifles. It's been reported that those rifles were obtained in 2010 and have been carried at least 7 times on campus. Why were they obtained, and under what circumstances are they carried?
Well, if we look at it regionally, our police academy here in San Diego County trains with both handguns and rifles in an active shooter environment. And so what we wanted to do was to be in compliance with that sort of training. In terms of how we use those when we believe there's a weapon that's involved in the situation and it might threaten students and staff, and so our officers are equipped with that for those purposes.
Professor Hatch, as you know, President Obama has proposed tighter gun restrictions. There is also a plan to stop violence on campus. How do you view that plan?
Oh, it's a vital plan. The funding that will come through here will be very important in providing the services that we need. What we need to make sure of, though, is that the funds don't become competitive between school counselors or school resource officers. We need to really look at what do all students need in schools, what ratio is appropriate to provide the comprehensive wraparound programs and services to students at a ratio that's appropriate.
And Chief Littlejohn, I want to end it with you. As you know, part of that plan includes restrictions on guns. But aren't these kids getting their guns from their parents? So What's the effect?
When we look at threat assessment, what we're looking at is the student's access or availability to weapons as well as their ability. And if you're teaching your kid how to shoot a weapon, let's make sure that that kid has the right wherewithal and the right mindset in dealing with these kinds of issues and looks at it maturely.
We've got to end it there. Chief Littlejohn, Professor Hatch, thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next News Hour, we sit down with Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And after Newtown, what science can tell us about the minds of rampage shooters. That's Wednesday on the PBS News Hour.
Carlsbad Planning Commission is considering a new housing project tonight. It would put hundreds of new homes where an old rock quarry used to be, and it stretches down the valley to an area with great historic significance for San Diego. KPBS North County Bureau Chief Allison St. John takes us to Quarry Creek, a project highlighting the tension between preserving open space and building for the future.
El Salto Falls look like something you would expect to see in San Diego's backcountry, with water foaming down over granite rocks to the creek below. But these falls are just minutes from Highway 78 in North County. They were very nearly graded over to make way for commercial development, but narrowly survived, closely surrounded by pads now lying in wait for hundreds of new homes. Todd Gallarno is Senior Project Manager with Macmillan, the developer. He says the city of Carlsbad's habitat management plan specified 45% of the site should remain open space, but he says Macmillan flipped that.
We provide 56% open space and only 44% of the site is developed. And at the same time, we protect Buena Vista Creek, El Salto Falls, and all the important historic and cultural resources on the site. So we think it strikes a very good balance.
The Quarry Creek Development Project is a good example of the struggle to balance the respect for the past with the needs of the future. The developer, Macmillan, says they need to build 656 houses in this valley to make this project viable. The city of Carlsbad says it needs 500 homes to meet their commitment for affordable housing. And Van Lynch, a senior planner for Carlsbad, says that's why this project is so important for the city.
We do have the housing element that talks about 500 units here. It is a good site for housing, being that it's adjacent to commercial services, hospitals. We've got the junior college, you got the transportation corridors of Highway 78, bus service to the area. So it is a natural site for higher density housing.
The site of the old rock quarry near El Salto Falls will fit 500 homes, but the houses would stretch down the valley to what is known as the Panhandle. It is where Buena Vista Creek runs past the old Marron adobe, built in 1839 and one of the original Mexican land grants. Diane Nygaard, a local resident, says Carlsbad's Open Space Committee identified this valley as the #1 piece of open space to save in the whole city. But the landowner, Hanson Aggregates, had already agreed to sell the land to Macmillan.
Here we are on the grounds of the adobe, looking across the valley, and the Panhandle part would extend from just behind you all the way across this view. So we're saying take those 100 or so houses that would be here, move them onto this part, or reduce the number of units.
Nygaard says there are other adobes in San Diego, but not with the sense of place of the Marron adobe. And she says because of the freshwater creek and the coastal Buena Vista Lagoon only 3 miles away, native people have lived in this valley for thousands of years.
People who really study our local history, Save Our Heritage organization, SOHO, has identified this as one of the 12 most important endangered historic sites in all of San Diego County. So that makes it pretty significant. It's not just a local Carlsbad site, even though it's very important to Carlsbad history. It's not just North County, it's all of San Diego County, and it's this key part of early California history. So it makes it really important to all of us. We think there's a way that everybody can come out of this hole. The developer just doesn't get huge windfall profits.
But Todd Gallarno of Macmillan says building all the homes on the old quarry site is just not feasible.
What occurs is that the units become smaller, they become more dense, and there's more 3-story units, and as a consequence, the average sales price drops significantly.
Gallarno says the price of the homes would not cover the cost of developing utilities and traffic mitigation, which he says is a costly part of the project.
We've analyzed a number of alternatives to the project in response to input we received from the community, and we do not believe there's an economically viable development plan for the property that doesn't include some reasonable use of the Panhandle property.
Nygaard isn't giving up.
Our vision is for what we call the Waterfall to the Waves Trail. We could have a trail all the way from the Sacred Waterfall at the head of the valley, through this entire area, all the way to the coast. It's still possible. If we lose this, then those things are no longer possible.
Carlsbad's Planning Commission will consider its options tonight before sending a recommendation to the full City Council. In North County, Alison St. John, KPBS News.
Well, after all those weather warnings yesterday, today turned out to be a pretty nice day, although on the cool side. There is still a high surf advisory for our coastline tonight. For the inland valleys, partly cloudy for the next few days, still cold in the mountains, but warming up out in the desert as we head toward the weekend. Recapping some of tonight's top stories, some parents in Encinitas have filed a lawsuit to stop an elementary school yoga program. Ashtanga yoga is part of the district's PE curriculum. Some parents say it's religious. The lawsuit calls on the Encinitas Union School District to suspend the yoga program and replace it with traditional PE. For now, district officials say the program will continue. They say there's no religious element to it. And utility ratepayers across California could get some money back from their electric companies. A judge has tentatively approved a $1.5 billion settlement in a case of price manipulations more than a decade ago. Federal regulators still have to approve the deal, which could eventually lead to a refund of about $20 a customer. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.